Hello and welcome back. This is Frantz Kantor here, cartoonist, illustrator, and toon talker, caricaturist, Dink Taylor spy, avid TV watcher. Okay, so I'm doing another drawing, and it's going to be another caricature, and I'm going to be doing, yesterday I did Lauren Bacall, so we're actually doing her partner. I'm actually doing her partner today. So let's go back to talk about this. So this is Lauren Bacall. This is the reference I used yesterday. So she's a 1940s and 50s film actress, and of course she's a partner of Humphrey Bogart, our subject for today. He's a really interesting character. So let's talk a little bit about him. So that's him, very sort of amiable guy, very distinctive features that you can immediately tell. He's got like large lips, full lips, quite a normal size nose, but his eyebrows are like, and in fact his whole forehead is sort of, has this sort of inner eyebrows raised, in a sort of a quizzical expression, which is very distinctive. So he doesn't have, like, he has a sort of an angry expression, but it's kind of, for us, it's almost like a comical expression. So he mostly animates his mouth when he's angry. So he'll tighten his lips, draw his lips in, and show his top teeth. So he has a very particular accent and very particular voice that people used to mimic a lot. We'll try and avoid that a little bit. Here's looking at you, kid. There you go. That's it. So he's very distinctive, and he's a really, really good actor. And I'm afraid I've come very late to the party with regards to Humphrey Bogart. So he's born in 1899, and he died in 1957 in January, just before I was born. Very powerful acting, and I can't say this enough. It's sort of like blown my socks off recently. I've kind of been binge watching his films, and for the past year, because I haven't really watched them. I haven't really seen them. I've seen bits of Casablanca or bits of African Queen, but to actually sit down and watch them, especially the Film Noir, is really exciting. Anyway, his films that you'll probably remember are Casablanca 1942, Maltese Falcon 1941, The Big Sleep 1946, African Queen 1951. What else is there? Key Largo, great film with Edward G. Robinson and Lauren Bacall, 1948. Treasure of Sierra Madre, 1948. Cane Mutiny, 1954. Dark Passage, great film, 1947. So there's most of the films, he and Bacall kind of owned the film genre of film noir. They just did it so well, they just really understood it. And these are some of the characters. You can always sort of remember him having the sort of trench coat that he had in Casablanca, in the plane scene, the end scene of Casablanca. He wore that a lot for a lot of his films, especially in the Maltese Falcon. So, very amiable, very sort of a likable guy, but there's something tough about him. There's something like about his demeanor that you don't want to sort of mess with. He's got this sort of underlying brute force. And this is Peter Lorre was in, I think, about 3 or 4 films. Casablanca, Maltese Falcon, played a great part. And this is Henry Greenstreet? Anyway, he was the other part. He was the fat man in the Maltese Falcon. He's also played parts in a couple of his other films. This one is obviously Casablanca. This is him and Katharine Hepburn in African Queen. I think he won an Academy Award for that. Sydney Greenstreet, again. Very powerful secondary actors, you know, to build up the tension and the story and the twists and turns and things. They all have these very intricate characteristics that make the films really powerful. This is a poster from Key Largo. Treasure of Sierra Madre. Very interesting man. Very, very interesting man. Very interesting Maltese Falcon. Beautiful face. You know, and even when he's smiling, you're not quite sure whether he bite your head off. But you know, it's like it's such a pleasure to watch him. Especially these two, the dynamics, the on-screen dynamics of Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart were really cool. This is a photograph we're going to be working from. I quite like the setting and the lighting on that. This is Mary Astor, of course, from the Maltese Falcon. The end scene of these two in the film is really very, very interesting. Okay, so let's start. Let's see what we've got here. So I've started to work out some possibilities. There are quite a lot of caricatures of his face around, and you know, and also from the 1940s, like caricatures and things. So we've got a kind of an idea what we want to do. I would love to sort of exaggerate it, but I think for today, we might get a bit lost if we exaggerate it too much. Maybe another day. So there's these beautiful shapes, these sort of what do you call it? Overhanging brow. The brow is where most of the action's happening in the caricature over here. So they're kind of pulling the eyebrows up and creating this sort of sad puppy dog expression in the eyes, but just in the shape. The eyes themselves, everything else is sort of very, very much in tune with the dynamic of the part of the role. So in Maltese Falcon, for example, where this photograph is from, you know, he plays a very moralistic detective. So it's sort of the guy that doesn't mind, you know, roughing up hoods, but draws a line at innocent parties. And he has, it's one of his things. You think it's going to be, because it's film noir, you know, usually in a film, well, not usually, but sometimes in a film noir, you have this overwhelming impression that the hero is going to suffer in the end. So watching Maltese Falcon, you kind of feel that tension, that build-up. You know, he's going to get a bullet in the end of the film, but in the end, of course, it kind of happens really quickly. He turns it and he survives. Very interesting end, the end of the Maltese Falcon. So I've taken the thumbnail, sort of a combination of these two, and sort of sketched something up which I can work with a sort of a sanguine, or what was it, like a red, it's a reddish brown pencil. It's called Indian red, which is it's a warm brown. Okay, so what else we have to think about is maybe the lighting. The lighting here, of course, is coming in from the right. So any shadows fall distinctly on the left-hand side of the form. The other thing that we have to consider, of course, is the mask zone, so-called, because it contains the eyes and the nose and the mouth. So the relationship between these elements, these four elements, are what gives us our recognition factor in the face. So we can recognize who it is. And that's partly due to proportion, I won't lie, but we're actually distorting proportion here. So we're trying to capture some of the essence, some of the details of the features, but put them into a new shape. That's what we're trying to do. Okay, so let's, without further ado, let's try to get something going over here. I've started to hold. Oh, by the way, when you work loose with a pencil, you have different grips, right? So this is what you call a like a violin bow grip. This is a normal pencil grip. So the tighter we get to the details, the more perpendicular the pencil will become. Okay, so let's try to get some definition in here. So because it's a film noir, and this is a photograph, publicity photograph for the film, the lighting's really good. The lighting's incredibly dramatic, which is both a boon and a problem. The problem is that the shadows are very, very dark, very distinctive, very, not distinctive, very reflective of the medium of film noir, right? So very dramatic. That's what I want. That's the word. Why didn't I get that word? So it's very dramatic lighting, which means that the shadows are very harsh. But for us to understand the face, we need to see through the shadows a little bit. So that's the problem. If we can't see very much, we've got to guess, because we've got to build up this drawing with a certain degree of believability. So there's lighting, shading, and all of these things which help create a sense of believability, a sense of truth in the drawing that we can actually apply to. So these are there's a lot of things happening in caricatures. In portraits there's a rule, but in caricatures as well, there's a hell of a lot of stuff we've got to consider. All right, so I'm going to try and articulate what I'm doing and why I'm doing it as I go. If I miss anything, you can, of course, just text me or put something in the news feeds that, like a comment. Pencil's really good for hair. I'm trying to comb the hair here. And I want to leave a line so that I can recreate that beautiful Brill cream shine, that reflectivity in the top. Or brilliantine, or Dapper Dan, if you watch Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? There's a lot of product, as they used to say in the hair biz. There's a lot of product in the hair back in those days. So they had a certain look that they had to try to keep. All right, so he's a brilliant actor. As I said, I didn't grow up watching him. I grew up watching cartoons. Let's be truthful. Hanna-Barbera and horror movies. Horror movies like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And that was my life for many, many, many years. So it came as a bit of a surprise that a lot of the voices or things that they were alluding to in these films, especially in Hanna-Barbera, like Secret Squirrel, were from Humphrey Bogart films. So Morocco Mole, Secret Squirrel's Offsider, was based on Peter Lorre, voiced by none other than the voice of Orson Welles' Offsider, the guy that did a lot of the Orson Welles type voicing for the Orson Welles' company. I think War of the Worlds. He was in War of the Worlds, but anyway, he the voice actor did a really good Peter Lorre, and of course, all of those tropes are like those who don't know Peter Lorre, those who don't know Morocco Mole. If you think of Ren Hoek from Ren and Stimpy, that's the voice that Chris Lucy and it was the Billy West created, was based on Peter Lorre, right? Anyway, these are the backups for this character in a lot of those films. And film noir is a very strange animal indeed in the film biz, because it's incredibly stylistic to the point that it is really over-dramatized. The music, the lighting, the sound effects, the acting, everything is hyper. It's really very, very staccato and what's punctuated with menace and extra meaning. So it's a world that they've created which is completely artificial in terms of reality. So it's incredibly stylized. Everything is stylized, loaded with meaning, like lights and gobos and things that they used to light the scenes with. You know, they would have these patterns on the wall which kind of look like jail bars or something, or spiders' webs. So it had a lot of meaning, and it was based on pulp novels, which were or dime novels, as sometimes they're referred to, which were short stories charged with slang and modern, or back then modern, 1940s and 50s references. So violence and murder, crime, G-men, the world of the criminal and the detective. I wonder if I should... Yeah, I'll leave it. So, I'm just trying to get a little bit more... I need to go in here again with the black, but I just want to make sure that these lines are in the right position before I start to darken them. Also, there's a little bit of shine coming in to distract my vision a little bit. Yeah. looks like it will be okay. So we've got a highlight that runs down the nose. We want to make sure there's enough tone beside it to make it pop. Okay, so his eyes are quite dark in the in this context, I think, because they've used certain filters that give you a darker response to the grey or the blues in the eyes. I'm trying to make sure that these are parallel enough. That seems to be right. So the brown pencil is quite nice against the grey paper. It gives you a little bit of context because it's warm. So it does refer a little bit to flesh tones, just a bit, just enough, I think. So we're going into another lockdown in Melbourne. We're in another lockdown. So this is a way of atoning for my sins. This is a way of keeping myself mentally stimulated. Really like doing caricatures because I tend to learn a lot more than just drawing when I do caricatures. It's a different process for a lot of artists, a lot of people, but I find it a great learning experience because you're kind of challenging yourself to see shapes differently than just positions. So you see them as opportunities for expanding or changing direction a little bit. So distortion and or exaggeration, it's not just distortion, but it's exaggerating, but it's looking at shapes differently. It's responding to them differently. That's the thing that's exciting about it, about the proposition of doing caricatures. It's just really another way of challenging yourself to create something that has a different set of rules. And the rules are kind of, produced pretty much on the fly with caricatures. You sort of respond to shapes differently. You respond to them with a sort of a challenge, an open challenge, to try to create a narrative, a different set of rules to draw by. So you're changing reality, which is something that you can do because guess what? At the end of the day, you're not a camera. You're better. It's much more exciting than a camera. All right, let's try to get some black into some of the spots. I've kind of alluded to where the black is going to go here and there. Hopefully this pencil will go over the shininess of the brown that I've established. If not, that's okay. We've got a bit of help with the black brush, which we can employ to create a stronger effect if we wish. There's some great shadows here. I'm going to try to keep as much of it as I can, but I do need to repair some of the details that's lost in the photograph. So put something in that is not really visible, but should be. There's another thing too I need to keep remembering. You know, the skin's tight on the foreground, on the forehead and the cheeks. So even if you don't ever see marks that reflect the cheekbones, whenever you put them in, right, they feel right. They just feel that, yes, that's where the cheeks are. Funny that. So even though you can't see it, it should be there. So yet again, there's another example of how photographs can let down the realism. So there's realism, and then there's like photographic realism, and maybe there's a difference between them. So realism should be more about, I think, believability and truth, rather than, you know, what the camera can catch in 1/400th of a second. Of course, drawings are not 1/400th of a second. They're not a slice of time. Even though you're working from a photograph, you're still referring to light and shade, rules of light and shade, and anatomy. So these are things that come from experience. Okay, this seems to be working fine at the moment. Let's try to keep an open mind. Could lose it though. There's no guarantees, but that's fine, you know. Because, you know, at the end of the day, who am I actually doing this for? I'm doing this for me, because I want to get something out of it. I want to explore. I want to have fun with this. So that's what you should actually remember when you draw. It's just how much fun do you want? The light, you know, when they say the camera likes someone, this camera likes this guy, but certainly the light understands his forms, the way they actually position this, these spots here. They're really explaining his expressions beautifully. So they're quite complementary effects. Always pay attention to direction of hair. I mean, pencils work really well in describing hair, but you've got to really think about it. So instead of just doing eyebrows like this, think about the hairs, right? So look at eyebrows closely, and you'll see that there's hair directions that come in from different angles. They're not all one direction. So think about it when you draw an eyebrow. Even though we call them caterpillars, they're not really as simple as that. There's a lot of forces pushing up here. He's got a lot of you call it expressions, right? Expressions show in the face, and you know, wrinkles and furrows and things like that are created from the expressions. But you go back to their origins and think, well, okay, fine, they're made by expressions, but you know, actors make expressions, they're make-believe, but really, most of the time, people are not on stage making faces. They're in real life making faces. So what do these expressions actually portend? What do they mean? They're reflecting thoughts and emotions that play in the mind. So they create a physical presence, like the presence of water creating the Grand Canyon over millennia. So you get thoughts and emotions that play in the mind, that play over the face in these expressions, and micro expressions too. So it's all part of the deal, really, for being humans. Humans are incredibly complex animals. Very, very. It's almost like we're not animals at all. That's the level of complexity humans have, because we communicate with these sort of micro expressions and things, much more accurately than we think. And these expressions are things that we want to show, right? Like a smile or an angry look or something. And also expressions that we don't want to show, that we try to suppress, but yet somehow come out. They show in the end. If somebody's really unhappy to see you, then they could smile, but then eventually the smile has to give way to what they're really thinking and really feeling. You can't help it, because we're very bad liars. So I'm going to try to leave a nice highlight at the side of the hair, even though it's not in the photograph. Don't care. I want that in there to try to give a little bit more three-dimensional form. So I have a side light, a rim light coming in from the right. So I'm giving this a little bit more complex, a little bit of more of a complex lighting situation. And I am, believe me, I'm just not colouring this in. I am thinking about and looking where the direction of the hair goes, right? It's combed in a particular way, in a particular direction and a fashion. So while the black pencil's blunted, I'm going to start to build up some of these thicker lines that I want to have around the face. The other thing I wanted to mention was that I've trapped this drawing inside this shape, this oblong rectangle. So that's to help with the composition. It looks like it's been pinned to the page rather than drawing it floating on the center of this expansive paper. Ooh, I made that too dark. So you have to keep an eye on, how things pan out with the black pencil. Just be very careful, because it can be very, very strong in comparison. So it could change a lot of the emphasis in areas that you don't want it. Some areas you want it, and some areas you don't. Okay. Oh, I might. Let's just keep it. We'll keep this at the moment. Keep it blunt. I am going to walk back over this drawing, so I'm going to be using a piece of paper to rest my hand on so I don't smudge it. So even though I'm pressing quite hard with these lines, but they will smudge and give you a weird effect if you're not careful. So far, so good. I'm going to sharpen this a little bit because I want to get into the right eye. Be careful with the, don't outline everything. Just be careful with a black pencil. Think about what you're doing while you're doing it. Okay, so I want to put some definition on the lower lid. I have to be careful that I don't start outlining too many elements here, because it's not appropriate to do that. It's not adhering to the light and dark that I'm noticing and building. So be careful how much you outline. Okay, so far so good. I think we're doing all right. Yay us. So, I didn't grow up with Humphrey Bogart. But I grew up with his tropes. I was familiar with that, played against Tham. And the detective style and the film noir style as a trope, I was familiar with that, even though I hadn't seen any of them. I had seen bits and pieces here and there, references over the years in different mediums. And, there's a distinctive little micro expression in the lips that I want to try to capture too. It's hard to explain, but it's based on the contours. If you look at the contours inside these shapes, not just the contour of the outer edge of the forms, but inside them as well. There's a lot of very distinctive yet subtle line directions here and there. I think it's appropriate to do an outline on the shadow, because it is quite dark after all, I might actually try to complement it by making this shadow and this one darker too. All right, I believe that. Okay. And so I have never watched his films. I wasn't really interested in it, to be honest, in that era until quite recently. I think I was more interested after, Rodriguez and Frank Miller did Sin City. It kind of made it very stylish homage to film noir as a genre, and that really sunk in. So it made it impossible to ignore, and I developed a passion for it. So I've been binge watching the past couple of years a lot of the films and really digging down into them, appreciating them on a big screen for once. That's the other thing too. It's trying to create a cinema experience. I would love theaters to have these old films up on a big screen, like an IMAX style screen, because it does warrant that. They're big. They're big stories, and big dramas, and they're incredibly stylish. and there's a whole film language associated with it. These guys, Bogey and Bacall, as they became known, they kind of held that whole genre on their own, and good on them. Okay, let's get some little highlights here and there. Just remembered I need to put in the black brush, because the black pencil's good, but I think the black brush is going to be a stronger ally here. So this helps establish some of the highlights of, the hot spots of the highlights, in a way, with this pen. We're going to get some help with the black brush. This is a zig brush, so the pigment, the black ink, is in the handle, so you squeeze it out and it goes into the brush itself. So it saves you charging it all the time, dipping it, and then wiping it and things like that, Those of you that remember or have ever gone into doing pen work or Indian ink, I haven't done a lot of that, but when I was working in the newspapers, obviously you had to cover a lot of ground quickly, so I couldn't just rely on the black pencil. It wasn't black enough, so you had to use Indian ink. So this black brush obviously goes thick and thin, depending on how much pressure you put on it. Outlines like around the contours are a safe bet to create a sense of roundness and three-dimensional properties, like it stands out from the background. Okay, so far so good there. Don't colour in. Remember, this is a drawing, so never colour in this area. In the background and stuff, colour in as much as you like, but where you need definition, don't fill it in. Because even though the photograph can say one thing, remember, you've got to try to get a slightly different effect in the drawing. Okay? Looks alright. How far did we get down with this? I think we got down to here. So put the outline in. Darken the brill cream a little bit, and we want to leave a line on that side to play with the light, to say that it's reflecting, like a rim light or a backlight or something like that. Because in lighting, the more three-dimensional properties in drawing are created by a dialogue between the shadow and the light. So in a way, this is a tonal drawing, which means it's in a way three-dimensional. So the dialogue I'm trying to create is believable dimensionality. And thinking, and dimensionality is also created by light and shadows. Okie dokie. I think it looks like it's going to work. Wasn't sure. I wasn't quite sure. It looks like that's a nice blend of thick and thin, light and dark there. It's got a nice sort of dialogue happening, which means that all of the elements are associating with each other in a relevant fashion. Not actually talking, but you know, they're relating to each other. Right, so I've got a white pencil here, which is now bringing elements forward and making them relate more to the lighting source that we've established. There's a main light source which is coming down from the right-hand side, but there's also reflecting lights that are coming in from that side as well, from the left. It's what they call like a fill, I think. It's different terms depending on whether you're talking about portrait lighting or cinema. But as long as you understand, you know, you're not coloring in with this pencil. You are establishing order. You're establishing a hierarchy from light to dark. You're also drawing texture. So texture's an important component, one of the 7 elements of art. So if you want to list the 7 elements of art, never use it's not a shopping list. It's a process. It's an organic process that you go through in the drawing process. So it's line, shape, form, tone. Line, shape, form, tone, color, texture, and space. There you go. So these lines I'm trying to recreate a sort of a hatching effect, not sort of colouring them in. So I'm trying to resist doing it too much. Also respect the light source, you know, don't just do it. Be careful. Has to make some, ultimately a sense to the lighting in some way. I mean, reflected lights are fine, but you know, make sure that they are somewhat believable. What's going on here? Okay. It's a nice Prismacolor. It's a nice sort of waxy pencil. It's quite soft but quite opaque as well. It has a tendency to keep building up, which is good. So far so good. Let's go. Let's continue on. The drama. Intrigue. My favourite Humphrey Bogart film is not Maltese Falcon. I like Maltese Falcon. I like it very much. It's actually a Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart film to the list here. And it's called this, 1947, The Dark Passage. And I mean, all of the other films are great, especially Treasure of Sierra Madre, Key Largo. But Dark Passage is where he has plastic surgery, and it's a very strange film. Very, very odd, you know. And I like that. It's like a lot of the characters talk to the camera because it's a POV style thing, which is unusual for 1940s. But really worked. So it's got a lot of the elements of the other films, danger, etc. Intrigue. Also humor and a very convoluted story, which just makes it even more bizarre, you know. Because you look at motivation of characters and you think, what that doesn't make. Why did they do that? And that I like that. I like that puzzling element in films. So it's not like a foregone conclusion. You know, there are elements of disaster waiting that you hadn't thought of. Okay, so what I'm doing here is building up. Next to the shadows is usually where the highest hotspot or the lightest zone of contrast is. So I'm just sort of building up a little bit of that. Now the ears are very interesting because the ears are made up of these shapes, these strange shapes, which have a rhythm. So once you're familiar with drawing ears, you kind of get an idea of what the rhythm is. So the elements are not as mystifying as you thought. They have a sort of a purpose. So you're able to get that rhythm in the details. So everybody has a different ear shape, but they all adhere to some form of rhythm. There's some usefulness of these shapes that they must obey. And that's the believability of creating an ear. The other thing about the ear, of course, it's not just about putting the shine on areas that catch the light. Ears have oil in them, wax oil, and that changes the texture. So there's a little bit of reflection happening inside the ear, which adds to the believability and the realism. Okay, so, again, one of the 7 elements, isn't it? Texture. Think about the texture of things. Something else to think about. Remember what I said about the cheekbone? There's the cheekbone, right? Remember that when you're drawing. It's not just about what you see, it's about what should be there, what you can't see, what you don't see. It's also important. I'm putting in a little bit of reflected light, and I'm going to help it out a little bit in a second with the brush. I think we might do that. Let's do that now. So I've got these paint pens, and they're good for establishing lighter elements than the pencil. So they're there really to help, kick up the contrast a little bit more. They're really good at that. And they're quite opaque, so you can draw over the brown pencil and it won't go pink, for example, because it's not just a brown pencil, it's a reddish brown pencil. This is a very warm brown. Everything here is for drawing, even the grey paper. It's a warm grey paper, so it's there for, drawing a warm drawing. It's good for sketching people, flesh. Be careful with some of these lines. The white is quite opaque. Let's try the other one. This is a white brush pen. Same deal, but it's got a pump at the end, and you pump the paint down to the nib and to the brush itself at the bottom, and hopefully you'll get a nice soft effect, able to get like a thick and thin line a little bit. That'll do, that's fine. Might just help this out a bit, the brill cream on the top, and there's a little bit over here as well. That'll do. The rest of it, let's have a look back in here. Be careful about how much white I put in. Remember, it's like colouring in. You're colouring it again. You're going to lose this grey paper, which you probably don't want to do. Alright, so let's see what we can do here. I'm going to go in with the black pen in a minute, but I just want to sort of help out these blinds. So gobos and light shapes and things, these light patterns that they put in films, in film noir films, give it a symbolic narrative. So stripes can mean, vertical stripes obviously mean jail bars or something like that. Concentric ones mean like caught in a spider's web, so the characters being captured. These shapes are used to drive patterns like arrows towards something, usually towards some dramatic point in the story. Let's try to, what I'm going to do? I'm going to get this. I got one of these Posca markers. There's acrylic marker, and it's a black one. It's quite thick. It's a chunky one like this. Beautiful because you know what? When you draw these, they're as thick as these text is, but they don't go through the paper so readily. They're paint pens, not ink pens, so they're not alcohol based. They smell just as bad. So I don't know whether it's a good thing. When I was a kid, we had we had things called Texticolors, and they went through everything, everything, cardboard, you name it. And there were, they would go through to the desk, go through to anything underneath, the work that you had underneath, your lunch, school bag, whatever. And kids loved them because they were really strong, and they often called them squeakers because they'd squeak when you draw with them. I lost a little bit of the contour from the nose there. You can see how it's disappeared now. We'll have to just put up with that. So I mean, usually I try to stay away from the contours that I've established and I'm filling in, but I made an error, and I'm probably going to live with it. So these blinds and things like that, sometimes they're used to draw attention, like to arrows, you know, alluding to perspective. And so another example on how corny and stylistic film noir was. But remember the roots of film noir, where it came from. Pulp novels, dime novels, because they were, 10-cent novels. They weren't literary masterpieces. They were not designed for that. They were designed for salacious reading. So that's where these films had their roots. So it's kind of like exploitational films, that have become popular because of Tarantino. Films that you would never watch again from the 70s if it weren't for someone like Quentin telling you that they were good, that they were great. Let's see if I can do something with I have another pencil color. Maybe, no, I don't think so. I was looking for a grey, but I don't think I've got one. Let's see. Maybe I can fix it again with this, if I'm careful. Me careful? Nah. Sometimes if you miss that contour, you see you've lost that thick, thin brush line because the black is now bled into it. So sometimes you have to work with your mistakes. All right, here we go. Let's finish this. I think I've done pretty much everything I need to do with this. Kind of, sort of looks like him, I feel. Let's put his name. I think that's probably going to suffice. You know what, I might just cheat and put in the second, use the other point marker. These lights in the eyes are sometimes accompanied by a double reflection. And what that does is make the eye glittery more. And if the eye's glittery more, then there's like, has he been crying? We don't know. But it just lends a little bit more, a layer of emotional intensity to the drawing. Okay, so this is Humphrey, one of these great stars of the silver screen. This is with, of course, Lauren Bacall. She's an incredible... They're a dynamic team when they're together, and certainly my favourite film is with them together in it. So there's Humphrey Bogart, and there's my version of Humphrey Bogart, and you've been watching me do this for an hour, and I thank you very much for joining me, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Bye-bye.